Hello, hello, and welcome to another exciting episode of Skeptics and Seekers Sunday Sermon. This is 4S. I'm David Johnson. Let's get started with special guest Kevin. How are you, Kevin?
I'm doing fine today. Thank you. Thank you for letting me on your show.
Letting you on the show. Wow.
Yes.
What a great segue. Talk about pitching me a softball. Here we go, folks. You haven't heard Kevin's voice on this show. We just interacted online. If you're wondering, how can I get on the show? Just shoot me an email, skepticsandseekers@gmail.com. You are already on. It's just a matter of scheduling from there. You can also just drop a comment almost anywhere on skepticsandseekers.squarespace.com. Log into your Discuss account and discuss away and say, hey, I think you're an idiot. I think I'd like to come on the show and prove it. You're in, buddy. I'll take it. So look, I love talking to real people and meeting them where they are. You know, I like talking to scholars too. I mean, I guess there's something we said for talking to people with terminal degrees about esoteric things. And the first season or two of Skeptics and Seekers, I mean, when Dale was on the show, we had scholars aplenty, all of them that you could handle. If you know their name, we probably had them on the show or almost had them on the show. They've been here. They're nice to talk to, but if you want to know what real Christianity looks like, the kind of Christianity that people actually believe, boots on the ground, butts in the pews, Christianity, the kind that's walking around in the grocery store with you, sitting next to you on the subway, working next to you at work, real Christianity. I do a daily show, Skeptics and Seekers Sunday Sermon Shorts. I do it almost every day. And I just pick up tidbits, snippets from the news. I troll through Christian news sites and I pick up articles and I tell you what Christians are talking about and what they are thinking and what they are doing, what they are actually doing and highlighting and feeling like this is a good representation of Christianity. That's what I do. And so you can see real Christianity in action. We're going to talk to Kevin today about a little real Christianity. Kevin is someone that, you know, some people might call an evangelical, because he is a former Christian and he has a story. I haven't even heard it and I can't wait. Kevin also has some surprises. We're going to hear from Kevin again on the show, hopefully many times on the show, because he is, if I can say, a self-styled, somewhat expert, way more expert than I am, on the parables. Anyone who's followed my Red Letters project knows how much I struggle with parables. In my Red Letters book, I didn't even cover the parables. Talking about the sayings of Jesus, he talked a lot in parables. I didn't even cover them. Why not? Because Jesus said, I'm going to say things in parables so that people don't understand me. And so I said, you got it, Jesus. I'm just going to go ahead and skip that then. So that's kind of how that went for me. So they're gonna be some conversations. I've been wanting to come back and do some discussions on Jesus parables. It's not like I missed them, folks. I know they're there. I just haven't had anyone who felt confident enough to talk about them with some degree of authority, and I don't have that. So Kevin is going to help us with that as the future goes. Now, Kevin asked me to talk a little while at first. Kevin, I think that I have bored the audience enough with my voice because we're doing something a little special today. We're not doing a sermon. We're doing more of an interview. And we want to get to know you, where your mind is, who you are, um, as I would introduce some of my my really important guests, I would tell them to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about their journey, and why the heck anyone should care. So, um, that's a lot of pressure. I am now passing that pressure on to you, Kevin. Take it away.
Okay, I'm Kevin. I'm from the Dallas area, and I've been studying the Bible for basically my whole life in a very fundamentalist sense. I grew up in a very small church with a very Bible believing family. And over the years, I've taken great time to be able to delve into the word, to understand it, and to both find out more about what God wants from me, as well as how I'm able to help others understand the word of God. And over the years, I I've studied, at the small churches that I went to, as well as after and while I was in college, I was part of several Bible study groups where I basically read the Bible, I don't know, 10, 15 times. And then after that, I went to Prestonwood Baptist Church. And from there, I went to, I've been part of several Bible study programs, as well as doing Bible study on my own. And but over all that time, a lot of the information I was reading was all about life application and how I can apply these things to my life rather than doctrine and understanding what the deep meanings of what God was trying to convey to me through this book. And after my dad passed away about 3 years ago, which was really hard for me, I really wanted to get into, he basically asked me, are you saved? And that was really hard. And at that very moment in time, I realized that there were some gaps in my knowledge, and I needed to get into the word and really understand what I believed so that I was able to pass on my beliefs to my children. And I've got a few children. I've got a couple of kids. One turned 8 last year, and she started asking me some very difficult questions. And I knew how to answer them, but the answers that I was having to give her was really hard. Like, why do we need Jesus in our lives? Where were the dinosaurs from? Things like that in the Bible, those answers are there, but they're not, but the answers that we have in our science books and things like that don't correlate with what's in the book. So, so it really shook my faith. And I think that, I needed to get into understand what really this book is all about, so that I could be a good father to my children, as well as be a good husband to my wife. And so that's basically my story and of my deconversion is I'm trying to find out, how am I supposed to teach this to my kids? How am I supposed to do this as my family so that I'm able to be a good father and be a good husband? And that's why I'm on this call, that's why I'm on the phone that's why I'm here with David, is so that way we can talk about these things and figure them out. And, and I can get a better understanding of where I am.
All right. Let me jump in here and ask a clarifying question or two. If you went over it already, I was listening, but I just need a little bit of clarification on some things that I think that the audience might want to also know. And then if I ask you anything that you don't feel comfortable answering, you can just say, I don't feel comfortable answering that. And that will be fine too. I will find another way to ask it and sneak it in some other way. So
Okay.
you can
I'm
keep
not afraid to
saying,
answer any questions you have.
that's all right. This is not an AMA. I don't actually like AMAs because you know what? You can't ask me anything. I'm not gonna there are plenty of things that I'm not gonna talk about. So that said, how long have you been on this side of deconversion? How long have you been, I guess the word du jour is deconstructing, when you could kind of realize to yourself, I don't think I'm a Christian anymore.
You know, I still struggle with that personally.
Hmm.
And I think that in my heart, I'm a Christian.
Okay.
In my brain, it's hard to believe it.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Uh, it does make sense depending on how we define heart. And so this is one of these words that I used a lot as a Christian, and I realized that it's I used a lot of words as a Christian that I never really defined, and I only realized after my deconstruction period that I don't know what these words mean. So in my heart is is one of those phrases where it sounds like something you don't need to define, but it's also kind of like spiritual. Well, what is spiritual exactly?
Right.
And so in your heart, you are Christian. Give
I,
me more so I can understand what that means practically.
okay. I'll try my best. So whenever I was studying under one of my pastors, he said that when you truly are a Christian, at that very moment, it's like striking a match. At the very moment that you become a Christian, Jesus comes into your heart and changes your life.
Mhm.
Now, um, and that is the true meaning of being in Christ.
Okay.
Now, we can try to believe what's in the book, but if it's not in your heart, it does not. It's not the same thing.
So
And so
let me just say, when you say in your heart, is that kind of a synonym or a metaphor for um, something that you deeply believe? Is it something, or is it more like this is an emotional truth for you, something that is in your heart?
it's it's um it's something like this. Although my dad and I had a very rocky relationship in many ways, and some people would say that he never really loved me.
Mm.
However, I know that he loved me because he was my dad. And there's
Okay.
nobody that could say that would ever be able to change my mind on that thing.
So it's
And
it's kind
that's
of an
what I
emotional
mean.
it's kind of an emotional truth then.
Right.
Right.
That's how I will say it.
So I understand uh, emotional truths. I have some of those myself, which might come as a surprise to some of my listeners. I am not completely analytical. I am not a calculating machine. I'm not Andrew, people. So I am in fact not powered by Intel or IBM Big Iron. So yeah, I do have a very well developed emotional core, and in that emotional core are some things that I might consider emotional truths. I know them because I know them because I know them, and even with even with the absence of evidence, I feel the truth of it so strongly that it becomes a type of truth. This is kind of how I define an emotional truth. Now, I don't put much stock in emotional truths on a practical level. So if I say I really, really feel like if I zoom across this train track, nothing's going to happen to me, even though there's a train bearing down, because I have a purpose in life, and I am not meant to die here on these tracks, and I just know it. Well, I might feel like that, but on a practical level, I ain't going across those tracks until the train passes. Okay, so there is a limit to how far I will take my emotional truths. They are a different kind of truth, if you will, and so maybe we can further define that as we talk. Now, so you say in your heart, in your emotional core of your being, you are a Christian. Christian is another word that really needs to be defined. After several years of doing this show, Kevin, what I have learned is that there is no definition of Christian. There's no one definition. Christians have different definitions of what Christianity is. And so rather than applying one of my definitions, without verifying that with you, I just want you to define for me and the audience, when you say you're a Christian, what do you mean by that?
Okay. That's a really good question. And that was a really great analogy about the train. I think that whenever I talk about a Christian, there's people who attend church and there's people who are part of the body of the church as a and those two things are like a Venn diagram. Now, for the most part, most people who go that are in the body of Christ go to a church. However, there are some people who are part of the body of Christ that are not attending the church, and the difference between somebody who's in like the hidden church is that they have a relationship with Jesus Christ in their heart. Whether sometimes those are suppressed, sometimes they're very vibrant, strong, in their faith, and they are spread the gospel and things like that. But either way, it's still there, and so that's what I mean by a Christian in this sense. So, I believe that, the match has been sparked in me, and regardless of whether I believe the first 5 books of the Bible, as well as the last one, and the contents of the Gospels within, God has sparked that spark within me. And I don't think that I don't know what it would take for me to change that. So therefore, I'm a Christian. Did that make any sense?
Sure, it does, but it does lead to a particular question. Darren, put the keyboard down. Okay, I'm going to ask the question now. We're going to get to your questions. so,
I'm sorry, I'm not looking at the keyboard.
No, no. I just know the usual suspects in the forum, and I'm channeling the things that they are wanting to comment on already. Just hold your comments. we'll get to them. So you actually called out the first 5 books of the Bible and Revelation, and some of the contents of the Gospels. I'm going to leave the Gospels off from this follow-up question. But do you believe that the person of Jesus that you know and have a relationship with is different from or has a character that is different from or opposed to what you read in the Pentateuch and Revelation?
There are, yes, in many cases.
Okay.
So, um, whenever we're talking about God's love in the in the um, in the Pentateuch or the Torah, um, there, it's there. However, I know that it's been edited and changed dramatically over the years,
Hmm.
or through, word of mouth, through like a version of telephone. And on top of that, paper was very hard to come by before, I would say, this, I don't know, the 17th century.
Hmm.
So people wrote on the things that they had. And so I believe a lot of man's words are in the book rather than the words of the Holy Spirit.
Okay.
Does that
So
make sense?
no, that's perfectly fair. So let me just ask a follow up about Jesus, because most Christians will people who traditionally identify as Christians
Hmm.
believe in some version of a Trinity, and they would say that Jesus is a part of the Godhead, whatever Godhead means,
Yeah.
and that Jesus was God uh, in the same sense that Yahweh was God, and that Jesus wasn't some new God freshly born, but he was always there and simply incarnated into a human form
Yes.
of Jesus. So let me just ask, the God of the Old Testament, is that Jesus or is that
That's the
someone
good,
else?
that's the big question. Because I mean, like with John, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. All that,
Hmm.
that defines that Jesus was always there, and he was God from the very beginning. And that's the main question that I have. Really, when it comes down to it, is can we believe these words that are in this book? Because there are so many things that Jesus Christ related back to the Pentateuch, like
Hmm.
the Moses said, or whenever he refers to Abel or Cain, or I'm sorry, refers to Cain, or refers to Adam or Noah, and these sorts of things. If he was God, knowing all, shouldn't he have known that those things weren't real?
Well, right, which is somewhat problematic and
Very
a thing that
problematic.
I've hammered on. They have to be literally real if Jesus calls them literally real, and
Yeah.
if he's wrong about them being literally real, then in what sense is he God? Um, but I think there are a lot of pitfalls in there, a lot of traps, and I hope that we fall into all of them in this conversation, or at least expose them. So, um, Jesus in the book of John seems to feel pretty comfortable identifying as God.
Yes.
However, in the other gospels, it's a little less clear. I'm not saying that it's not there at all, but it's a little less clear. And so when Jesus is in fact talking about some of these Old Testament things, if he is God and he knows he's God and he wants people to know he's God, why didn't he put himself in the story? Why would he
I
go back
cannot
to
agree
what
with you more.
Moses said? It doesn't matter what Moses said or what Moses taught. It matters what he taught. So he could have said that I allowed Moses to present a decree writ of divorce. He could have just inserted. He just could have said it right there. Um, the father and I thought it was a pretty bad idea, but we allowed it. For these purposes. Why not? because why wouldn't he just do that? If he's doing it in the book of John, he should be doing it everywhere. It would seem, and yet it seems like Jesus goes out of his way at times to separate himself from God, what God did and said and wanted, and himself. So this is kind of problematic for me as I think about this on the other side of faith. Did Jesus claim to be God, as he seems to in John, or did he distance himself from being God, as he seems to in most of the synoptics?
You nailed it on the head. That is the problem with the Gospels, because like whenever he was talking to the demons that he called out of the pigs in Mark, he said, "Don't tell anybody who I am. You're the Son of Man." And he shut him up, right?
Right.
But in John, whenever he was calling Nathaniel, he said, "You're going to see greater things than these," you know, and and whenever he was at the well with the Sumerian woman, he said, "You're talking to the Messiah. I'm right here." And and there she goes and she witnesses to all her people in her whole town. Where is this story in the synoptics? You know, and if you know anything about the history of the Bible, that story of the Samaritan woman is actually a floating text that took place, that they weren't sure whether if it was supposed to take place in Luke or John. And the reason why they put it in John was because the revealing of the Messiah in Luke, he hardly ever reveals it.
Right. Yeah, it's a bit of a problem. We might come back to that, but I also want to go back to um, something else that you touched on earlier. I want to ask some questions about the Old Testament, the Pentateuch in particular. You mentioned that there might be some inaccuracies in there due to the fact that most people couldn't write, and it's not like people were writing things down at the time. So these are stories that are told later and eventually compiled and redacted and edited and put into the forms that we have. And so we don't necessarily know that we have the true character of God. But I get the sense that you believe that the God of the Old Testament was a good God who was sometimes badly represented in print. Is that an accurate statement of how you think of the Old Testament God?
Yes.
Okay.
If you look at the beginning story in Genesis,
Hmm.
when God created the world, that's the true nature of God. He created everything and made it good. Now the question is, and then man fall, fell, right? And from then, that's the story. That's the story of the Old Testament of basically how wicked man is, how wicked we are, and how we are. And then the New Testament is how we're reconciled to a holy God.
Right. So um, I'm gonna have to dig in here a little bit. There may be a wound with a scab on it that I'm gonna have to peel off a little bit and dig around in. So I just let me know if I hit something sensitive. But um, let me come at it this way. How do you think, in your mind? I'm sure you must have a story for this in your mind, some headcanon as to how it happens. How do you think that this loving, good, great God that people started to write about turned evil in the stories? How did people go from writing about him as someone good to someone that frankly looks a lot like a monster? Um, if he's a good God all that time, how did people start getting the impression that he's the kind of God that would, for instance, sick a bunch of bears on some kids for making fun of a ball man.
Well,
That's not a good God.
it's
And
not.
so, and we can go through just a litany of things that show him not to be a good God. But the real question is if he's a good God, and if that was properly represented at first, how did it go south so quickly and so thoroughly? How did people start to get this impression of him?
Well, if you take a story like David getting the census of his troops, right?
Mhm.
Basically, he was given a choice of three things, right? One was is that he was going to get attacked by an army to be able to ravage his land. One, he was going to allow God to be able to have pestilence, and then I can't remember the third one.
The third
And
one is
David,
that God would just reap um, from the people in the kingdom, and he would just kill off a certain number for 2 days. I think it was let the
yes,
death angel run loose for a couple of days.
yes, and that's the one he chose,
He
right?
chose that one because
He
his
chose that one.
reasoning was, I would rather put my fate in the hands of a merciful God than to put my fate at the hands of my enemies. And
That's
so
right.
he puts his fate in the hands of God, and God kills, I think it was 70,000 people. And it was so bad, the slaughter was so disgusting that God himself had to call it off early because it was it
Well,
was it was scheduled to go for a couple of days. But God's like, oh man, what a jerk I was. I got bloods everywhere. They're never gonna clean this up. I gotta call it off.
yes, yes. And but the real interesting part was that it never got to Jerusalem, where David was
Oh
in
yeah,
the
no,
story.
David was gonna be fine no matter which one he
David
chose.
was totally cool, even though he was the one who did the terrible act,
Right.
right? So, what I believe it was a propaganda stunt by by the king and the rest of his people, right? They said that it was God, and instead, it was actually just happened to be nature, right? And that a lot of people died, like and he basically that was the story, and I think that whole thing happened throughout the Bible in the Old Testament through many parts.
But why call
Whether
that God?
I
Why?
I think it was they said it was God, so
But
that
but
that way they could blame it on someone else other than the king. Why didn't the king do something about it? Why didn't he help? Well, it wasn't him. It was God, and God is in control,
right, but it
and
sounds
that's
like
what I believe.
if they're blaming God, then they feel comfortable enough doing that. They must not have believed in God at all. They must not have heard about God and what he could do if they feel confident enough to say, "Yeah, I slaughtered 70,000 people. Uh, I'm going to blame God for that. That's going to go okay for me, right?" So there's no one in their right mind, it seems, who believes in God and has a relationship with God would do that.
Yeah, I think they would. I think they would, and I think that they.
What
I
do they
think
think
that.
would happen to them? So,
Well, the question is, was it God? They said, "Well, we got to blame it on something. We
right,
don't know what it is that
but I
caused
mean,
this thing.
I'm just
We
taking the.
have to blame it on God,
Let's say it wasn't
and we have to
God.
say it was God."
Yeah, but let's say it wasn't God. God didn't do it. God's innocent.
Right? He's totally innocent in
Okay,
this
so
case, I believe,
why didn't God punish them for accusing him of this slaughter?
because God is a merciful God, just as David said. The whole
Ah,
point of the story was is that God was a merciful God,
I see.
right? As from a God perspective. Now, however, the David was never harmed. He should have been. He was the one that he should have had his head cut off, and they should have replaced him as king. right? And
Right.
but instead, he was never harmed, nor was Jerusalem, but all the surrounding cities were.
Okay, so
And
you're saying that David was one bad dude.
oh, he was ruthless.
Yeah, okay, I would agree with that. He was he, he to the extent that I believe that the Bible accurately depicts David and his reign and the reign of the kings and so forth, which I do not, in fact, believe. But to the extent that something happened to some Semitic peoples at that time and that they had some kind of civilization, let's just say that there was a King David. The way they seem to remember him is that he was a ruthless dude. Uh, he was not one to be messed with. Not a good man. Um, so if David, who is one of the key figures in shaping our understanding of who God is, because he's credited for writing the Psalms. I'm sure you
Right.
probably wrote some
Not
of
all of
them,
them, but a lot
right?
of them.
But he's credited for this work, and that's for some Christians that's the only book they read. But it shapes a lot of what we think about God, and he calls this God good and merciful. He is a man after God's own
Own
heart.
heart.
But you have to think, if God and David are buddies, and David's a very bad man, wouldn't it stand to reason that God is also a very bad man?
Well, the question is was David a God of man of or a man of God's own heart, or did he just say those things to make it sound like he was? Because in my opinion, he was not.
But how
I
can you
mean,
how can
with
you
the way
tell?
he
Because
killed Jeriah
David
and
tells us who
uh,
God is, right? I mean, we're getting a lot of information about God from this man.
right.
So I'm not sure how you can separate that out. If David is a bad dude and he's the one informing you of who God is, why would you believe him about God?
Well, that's a very valid question, and I think that most of these stories were never written by David. Only the Psalms were, right? If any of them were written by David at all.
Agreed.
So um, basically, if you take like First and Second Samuel and First and Second Kings, all of those were written by people who were not David, writing about. And matter of fact, like they were mostly what happened during the the kingdom reign in Judea,
Yeah, kind
right?
of their version of the histories.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly. And if you notice, there's two different sets because you go that and then you go to Chronicles and they're
right. Kings,
different,
Kings
right?
and Chronicles. Pretty much whenever there is a story that's repeated in the Old Testament, one in Kings, one in the Chronicles, maybe you can throw in the Samuels there as well. Whenever you see a repeated story, the details are different. Not just
Hmm.
different, but contradictory.
Exactly. Who killed Goliath, whatnot. It's all
Yeah.
it's just, it's a
Yeah, and,
mess.
and just how many chariots were there again?
Well,
So
yeah.
anyway, yeah. So it's just, um, so I don't, we don't know who wrote those works, but we do know this: these were the people who shaped our understanding about God. And so, working backward from David, we have to get to the Pentateuch because that's where it starts. And I'm just going to come out and say a thing that will be shocking, shocking, I say, to anyone who's listened to me for a while. I am a Moses mythicist. I don't believe that a man named Moses ever existed. I believe that he is the King Arthur of the Hebrew people. And so that said, if we take some of the more scholarly ideas about how the Pentateuch was written, there are some ways to get there without needing a Moses character to do it. Do you believe that Moses wrote the Pentateuch?
No, I do not.
All right,
Absolutely do not.
tell me about the Pentateuch and how we got it from your understanding. Um, Understanding anyone listening, I am not a scholar. Kevin is not claiming to be a scholar. We, we're people, just folks like you doing the best we can. That disclaimer aside. Uh, Tell me how you believe we got the Pentateuch, because this is going to be really, really important in understanding your story and understanding your journey.
Okay. So for years, I believed that Moses wrote the Pentateuch,
Mm-hmm.
and I fought for it. And anybody who went up against me, I said, look at what Jesus taught, and he taught that Moses wrote the Pentateuch. So, um, and but um, after lots and lots of very tedious research, I believe the documentary hypothesis. So that there were at least four authors or four groups of authors who wrote it, and the story of the creation story, um, chapter one is different. Right, there's an Elohist and that whole thing. You know what I'm
Yes.
saying?
Yes.
I believe that, and I think that they were mostly told as oral tradition passed down over time. Now, I don't know. The big question I have is the question that Bart Ehrman has: is how did an Egyptian name like Moses get into the Pentateuch without there being somebody real from Egypt? I don't know that answer. So I don't know. And I'm a big follower of John Shelby Spong. I've read a lot of his books.
Yeah,
And
I've spoken to him once or twice.
oh, you spoke with John Shelby Spong?
I have
Oh my
shaken his
goodness,
hand.
he
I
is.
have touched his skin.
Oh
It's
my goodness.
He's a real dude.
Yeah,
So,
he's a real dude. He's a real
and
dude. He passed
interestingly,
away.
there was
He's a
no
good
good
man.
reason for him to remember me from one time to the next. But in the second time I met him, he actually remembered me.
Oh
And
wow.
what a sharp mind this man
Very
had.
smart man.
Yeah.
Very
So
smart man. And I think that, but either way, you know, he didn't believe that Moses parted the Red Sea. He thought they went through the Sea of Reeds, right? And the chariots got um, mud in their wheels, couldn't go any further. The small amount you know, of Hebrew people escaped, and then they proliferated, and they um, that sort of thing.
mhm.
And I think that, from my understanding, that's what Bart Ehrman believes, and that's kind of what I believe. But I don't know about Moses. He's mostly a legend, but I do believe there was somebody that was a Moses that was from Egypt, because they wouldn't have inserted that name without it being somebody like him, because the name is Egyptian. How do you
Okay.
deal with that?
Well, first of all, I deal with it with a good, healthy dose of I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's kind of my go-to answer. And historically, I don't think we can know. But I don't know if you're familiar with. I think it's David Finkelstein.
I've heard
Um,
of the name.
so no, I don't think this is the right guy here. Sorry,
Oh, it's okay.
maybe it's Israel. Let's see. Anyway, I don't remember. Finkelstein was the last name, and he. This was a decade or two ago, came out with uh, very interesting uh, research. And this is a Jewish professor. And what he basically discovered, and it was a matter of some talk. I'm trying to talk and Google all at the same time. Israel Finkelstein, I think is what I'm looking for. Um, that there was no captivity. There was never a time when a million Israelites were held captive in Egypt. And so the best we can show is that, some Semitic peoples lived in Egypt. And so if you want to take one of the stories, the story that leads us up to the enslavement in Exodus, the story of Joseph, for instance. I also don't believe there's a Joseph, but even if there was some archetype, that because of circumstances, whether it be famine or whatever, they found a home in Egypt, and they lived there happily, and they eventually left. But there is actually no archaeological trace of the kind of exodus that the Bible talks about, and there would be traces of it at that scale and for the length of time that they were supposed to be there. And so the way I would deal with a name like Moses being in the text is that there were probably a lot of names like Moses
Yeah,
back then,
that makes
because they
sense.
were living in Egypt. They would
Right.
have been interspersed with them, interbred with them. Of course, there would have been names like Moses. It's kind of like, you know, black people back in slavery times who showed up with names like, uh, Jarvis, or, or something that you might
Yeah.
associate with
George
a
Washington.
wealthy white person. How did that happen? Well, it's because they had sex with the black slaves. That's how that happened. And they grew up in, some of them grew up in rich white homes with rich white names and with rich white educations. That's how it happened. And so you can look a couple of thousand years from now, and you might say, "Oh, wait a minute! During this time of oppression, how do we end up with a person like this? There must have been a Moses who let these slaves out of captivity in America." Not true. That's not how it ever happens in history. And so there is no reason to believe that the Bible is the one exception that narrates this kind of exodus accurately. We simply know that that's not what happens, and historically and archaeologically, we have good reason to believe that that never happened. So of course you would have names like Moses, and probably a lot more names like that too. But if you're going to get a hero, if you're going to establish kind of an archetypal hero, why not a nice Egyptian name like that? Because it's a part of the narrative.
Right. Right. I follow you on that. And that's, we don't know. Just like you said, there's no real answer to it. All we know is, that we don't know. And it's just a matter of just, what is the best guess?
Right. So I don't worry myself so much about the details of the story from a historical perspective. It's literary history in a way, and more literary than history. It's the way a people talks about their past, uh, in a kind of an almost allegorical type way to give themselves a sense of place and story and progress through time. If your history is lost, you'll invent a history because all peoples need a history. We need a founding story. That's just kind of human nature, I think. Native Americans, we can kind of laugh today, which I think we shouldn't do. We kind of laugh today at Native Americans talking about, how the great spirits, did this and that to seed the land and give them life, or whatever their founding story is. Everybody creates a founding story before there is actually any real history about them. And so I kind of see the Exodus story in this way, as a part of the Jewish founding story. It's something that would have happened a lot later in their time. In fact, I think that one of the earliest. I'm just digging a deep hole for myself in the comments. I know this already.
No, you're doing great. You're doing
the,
great. Because you're right on target.
One of the earliest people in Jewish history in the Bible, as that story is narrated, that I think is probably an accurate depiction, or fairly accurate, would be King Josiah. And it's interesting, as late as King Josiah came, that's when we got the book of Deuteronomy, because it's like they had the 4 books, but they had lost the book of law here, and Josiah found it. He produced it, and he reintroduced it to the people. Well, I don't think he reintroduced it at all. I think that's just as a part of their founding story. He produced it and gave it to them. But I think that's how we got all of the Pentateuch over time in ways like that. And so it's kind of founding historio allegoro literario poetry in a sense. So it's not really giving us a kind of a blow by blow history of the Jewish people. And so I think you have to read it that way to understand it. Now, it sounds like you and I have maybe different understandings of how Exodus came about, but we both agree that Exodus is not some blazing flash of detailed truth dictated from God to Moses while they were in a tent talking, and this is what came out of that. All right.
No way. He couldn't have carried all that stuff. He couldn't have carried it. I mean, he carries stone tablets or whatever it may be. There's just no way.
A lot of stone
tablets.
And
so that's a lot of stone, bro. And I mean, if you've ever carried brick a little bit away, it's kind of heavy. And
he would have needed a train of people to carry his notebook.
A ton, yes. It would have been an enormous amount. So
the notebook camels, they were
they didn't have camels, I don't think, back then, right?
So my question then, with that understanding, I did say that this was going to tie into your journey here. You look at the beginning of this founding story. You recognize that Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 are probably different traditions that are smashed together. You recognize that this is probably the historical accretion of the split between the priestly Jews and the prophetic Jews, and we could talk about that a lot, but there's no need. I'll just use that as a shorthand. So we look at that story, that founding story, and you see some things in it that you can say to yourself, well, this is definitely not who God is. And then you see some things in the story that you say, this is definitely who God is. Now, my confusion with that is it's all the same story. It all comes from the same kind of source. And so when you're reading this story as carefully as I know you have, how do you come up with the bits that do represent truly who God is and sort that from the bits that don't represent who God is?
I cannot remember the verse, but it's, first off, let's just take Psalms 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. I believe that is God. Somewhat through the Holy Spirit that was delivered through revelation from God. And there's another verse in the
Well,
Bible
hang on.
where,
So
go ahead,
before
I'm
you go to
sorry.
yeah, no, you're doing fine. Why do you think that represents God? I mean, it's a pleasant kind of verse. The Lord is my shepherd; I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green
Like
pastures by the still
pastors,
waters.
yeah,
Um,
restored my
He
soul.
restoreth my soul. All that good stuff. That that sounds very pleasant, although it's not the experience of a lot of people with their God. But that said, I can see where that is an attractive depiction of what God must be like. But that psalm also came from the same person who wrote, "Blessed are those who take the babies of the who was it, the Assyrians or Babylonians at the time, and smash their heads against the stones." Same
Right,
guy, same book. That's
right.
also God, or is it?
The question
How
is,
do you sort that out?
the question is it God? Right?
But that is the
You know,
question. So how do
yeah.
you say in Psalms 23, yes, that's God. In Psalms 100 and whatever, nope, that's not God.
It's um as irrational as it may sound, I believe it is. And I don't believe that God would tell someone to smash baby's brains up against a stone.
Well,
So
do
maybe
you
that, like I said, that may be irrational and maybe silly, but
could there be a God that is so bad, an evil God who would want that? Because David, remember the guy who is credited for writing both of these psalms, uh, that's the God he was comfortable with saying, "Yeah, this is my God. This is he felt like this is this is who God was, and this is the guy who said, well, not who said, but who is said to be a friend of God." And he described his God in this kind of monstrous term, and he also describes this God as someone who gives a great deal of peace and comfort. And so I say again, what kind of God would it be that gives a man like that peace and comfort? Do you really want to come face to face with the God of Hitler, the God who Hitler thinks was on his side? Do you really want to meet that God? So yes, this horrible man David had some
ruthless.
idea of a God who liked him, uh, and I'm just thinking, no thanks. so so King David, know who you are, and anyone who's giving you aid and comfort, I don't want to meet.
Right, right. I know
So
what you're saying.
you still have to come up. Even you don't even have to come up with it for me. I don't care ultimately. I mean, I'm asking questions.
Right.
You don't have to come up with it for the audience. The audience is going to ask these questions, but you have to come up with it at least for your own self. Uh, to reason out, because we're talking about your journey right now, right? Your faith journey. Your faith journey doesn't have to make sense to anyone except you. And uh, if you don't have an answer that would be fitting to convince people that are not you, I'm just asking this question to make sure that you have answers that really convince you, because this seems to be one of those things where it rather than to come up with a conclusion that this is God here and that's not God there, that you take more of an agnostic approach, because otherwise it's just arbitrary. God is the one who uh, who meets the needs of your desires, of your creation. He's, all of the stuff that you like, that becomes God. And that's not really God at that point. That's just an outworking of your psyche, and it's good and it's beautiful. It sounds like you're a good, beautiful person. I would love to meet the God that gives you aid and comfort. But I have no more reason to believe that that God is real than to believe that the God who gave David aid and comfort is real when he was, going around doing really horrible stuff. And so I want to hear from you that in your mind you have this very clear, that for sure that the God that you think is real, and that is described in the Bible, is actually real, or that you're still working that out. Maybe you still have some questions. Maybe I've created some questions. I just want to take a gut check and figure out where you are there with yourself.
Where I am with myself is I want to believe that, the God of, you know, of Psalms 23, the one whose, you know, steadfast love, you know, abides in us, and that we are, you know, that we are, that he loves us and he wants us to, live life abundantly. That's the God that I believe in. A lot of these other words
I want
all
to believe that.
written. Yeah,
Let me
go ahead. I'm
just
sorry.
interrupt you. No. I'm interrupting because I'm rude. Um, I the words you said when you introduced that is that's the God that you want to believe in. All right, I want to believe in that God too. I would love to believe in that God. That's a beautiful depiction of a God. All right, I don't believe it, but I would love to. And if that God is real, that's a God that I would love to meet. Um, I don't think that all versions of God are bad, but you understand that there is a, a gap, we'll call it,
Mhm.
between what we wish was so and what is so.
Right. Oh, I know. And there's more written about the evil God in the Old Testament than there is about the steadfast love God, right?
Right. And
We
so
know that.
that's part of the question that I was asking you earlier very badly. And so I appreciate that callback so that I can maybe take a better pass at that, which is, how does a good God who first presents himself to people and they accurately understand he's a good God, how do they ever come to think he's a bad God? I mean, if he's a good God and they're writing about him, they're writing about their experiences, they're telling stories about their experiences. Those stories get handed down over time. Very early in the story, that God goes from being a good God to a bad God. How did they ever get that impression? You mentioned Genesis 1, kind of an okay God. Genesis 2, I'm beginning to have some questions about this
Rightfully
God.
so.
And Genesis 3, yeah, so we're already at kind of evil God territory by Genesis 3. He has condemned humanity to die because one person made an error in judgment, and they didn't even have the capacity to know they were wrong. Because you see, the one thing that God didn't want them to have was knowledge, the knowledge of good and evil. I'm already suspicious at this point.
See,
And they
mhm.
they're deceived by a creature who was placed in the garden with them. He didn't have to be there. God put that creature there.
Yeah,
Knowing how
I've
smart this creature was, deceived them, and that wrecked somehow the entire story of humanity. I
Yeah.
can't give that God a pass. And so, even if you were just talking about the very first story in the Bible, where it starts off okay, in the beginning, God created the heavens and earth. That's pretty good. I'll take that. And it gets down to, oh no, they've eaten the fruit. What will we do? We're gonna have to cast them out. They're gonna have to die. And I'm thinking, oh no, that is not the hero that we deserved.
Well, I think that the thing about it is, although we read the story of the temptation and the fall, we read it as the fact that Adam ate of the fruit. The question I have is, was that the real sin involved here? Because if you read Eve's quote that she was talking with the serpent, she said, we're not supposed to eat of it or touch of it. And that was not commanded by God in the story. He said, just don't eat of it. Now, the real question I have is who told her not to touch it? Who told her not to touch the tree? And now it wasn't the serpent, it wasn't God. So it would have only have been from either herself in her mind thinking that, or two, Adam told her not to touch the tree. So was the real sin Adam telling her, don't touch it? And therefore God made it delicious. She took of it and ate of it. And because Adam wanted to not, didn't want her to be condemned on her own, he ate of it too. That's what I believe the real sin was. It was the sin of the Pharisee. They put up guardrails around the law so that way people wouldn't break the law. In this case, it was the same kind of thing. Adam put up guardrails around the fence so that way Eve wouldn't touch the fruit. Eve gone ahead and took it, and therefore she ate of it, and therefore sin entered into the earth, right? Now, I don't believe any of that happened, but in the story, I believe that's what it really was trying to say, is that, don't tell somebody, the purpose of the story is not to put up guardrails where people can't enjoy their lives. But over all this time, we've always looked at it as the fruit was eaten, therefore sin came into the earth, therefore death came into the earth, and we all now are perishing. We need a savior. Does that make sense?
I think I understand. I think I understand you. I don't think it made sense to me. So you might have to say some of it again. But let's just take it at face value. So God tells them, excuse me, in the story. We're not talking history here, but it literally.
Right, we're talking allegory.
Right. So in the story, God forbids them from eating the fruit.
Right.
The man who was there first maybe sees Eve really eyeing that fruit, and not knowing what's in her mind, he sees her reach for it and he says, don't touch it.
Or maybe he said, or maybe it was like this. He loved her so much that he said, don't touch it. Don't even touch the tree.
Right. I'm just trying to,
whatever reason it is.
Yeah. I'm trying to give it the most generous,
right.
Interpretation possible, but for whatever good reason that would have been in Adam's mind, he says, don't touch it. That seemed like pretty good advice, because God said this is death fruit.
Right.
This is death fruit. First of all, don't even look at it. And now it's hard not to look at it. It's right in the center of the garden, and it's attractive to them. Okay, God made it attractive. He put it where they could. So, maybe he sees over the course of, I don't know, a few years, Eve just staring at that thing, and she gets closer and closer, and he says, what are you doing? That's death fruit. Don't touch it. Don't go there. Don't go over there to the other tree. It's right next to it.
Right.
But don't just leave that alone. That seems like good advice. that doesn't seem like something that should be punished. It seems to me that the real problem, even in this allegory, is not, even taking the most generous reading of your interpretation, is not that Adam put up more guardrails. It's that the tree was there in the first place. Because there was no reason for God to make a physical instantiation of death to look good and smell good. And if he knows who they are, these baby adult humans who don't know the difference between right and wrong. And all they know is, apple salad is good, but it might be better with that pear over there. And it smells real good. And this right next to it. Maybe if of course we were going to eat it. That's what we are. So why was it there in the first place? That's not a good God.
If you go to Ephesians 2, it'll tell you why.
All right.
We're supposed to be examples for the angels.
Oh, poor angels. This
Ephesians 2:10, I believe. It's in chapter 2. We're supposed to be examples for further creations in the future. I think that's right. I'd have to go back and read the chapter because I'm a little fuzzy on it, but I think that's right.
Well, I'm just gonna let that stand right there. I really want to explore this territory more, but no, I'm not letting you go just yet. I want to get to the New Testament.
Oh yes, it's 2:7. So that the coming ages he might display the immeasurable riches of his grace through the kindness of Christ Jesus. That's why we're here.
Right. He did it. He made a temptation that he knew we would fall into so that he could show us grace.
Yes.
That's monstrous. That's like saying I made a disease that would wipe out a population so that they would come to me and I could show them grace by giving them the cure, to the disease I gave them. That's not good. That's monstrous. That's monstrous.
That's God for us right there. That's
God. That's the God of David. And apparently also the God of Moses. And let's not even talk about Solomon, whose first act when he becomes king is to shed a lot of blood.
Kill somebody. Try it. David told him that.
Yeah. So let's just walk away from that for a moment. Okay, you commenters, you are free to begin your commenting. I can assure you, by the time that they get to this part of the program, they will already have written hundreds of words. These are my people.
I hope I've entertained, and I hope I haven't upset anybody, and I apologize if I have.
God, you've upset many people. You got to get over that. It doesn't matter. It's the internet.
My intentions were always good. I promise.
Half the internet is upset just because you have taken another breath. You gotta. You'll learn how to let that go. That's fine. On the internet, you're not alive if you're not upsetting people. You should check your pulse. You're not doing it right. So let's move over here to the New Testament, because this is also a very important part of your story. So I've raised, hopefully, some questions about the character of the God of the Old Testament, even when depicted at his best. I want to let those questions percolate in your mind. But I also want to raise some questions about the character of the God of the New Testament. And that's a theme that we will be picking up kind of as we go. I had bookmarked a couple of scriptures here. The first we will talk about, again, in more detail on another show. So not fair for me to spring it on you, but I'm not a fair man. I'm a David.
Oh,
Never trusted David. You know who we are.
that
Don't
never
worry
trusted
about it.
Saul. He's the one that threw the spear into the wall trying to kill him.
So,
Yeah, it was
so
David always did everything up front. Saul was the one that was the one doing everything behind
well,
closed
yeah, look, he
doors.
was another bad dude. But honestly, I think I would take my chances with Saul over David, because when God told Saul to wipe out those people,
Yeah, he
the
had
last
mercy.
man, that's right. Saul said, "Yeah, but that why should he's an old king, and there's some kids and there's some good cattle. Why are we killing the cows?" Um, Saul had a modicum of sense. David would have said, "Yeah, already done it."
That's right.
You got any
And
more
I cut
people
the
for me to
penises off.
slaughter? So yeah, I killed him real good. Killed him real good, God. so, so yeah, I think I'd probably take my chance with Saul. But that said, the rich man in Lazarus. Now we would both identify this as a parable. This is not actually identified as a parable in Scripture.
No, it's not. Yeah, right.
Uh,
Absolutely.
but I suspect it is a parable for many literary reasons that I've gone over in other shows. So I just want to read a little bit of it, if that's okay. Do you happen to have that open too? I know that you were looking up some stuff, but if you want to, it's anyone who wants to follow along. This is Luke 16, starting with verse 19. I don't think I'll read the whole thing. Everybody knows what it is. There was a rich man who was dressed in purple and fine linen. That purple suggests that maybe he was highborn royalty, something like that. So he's dressed in purple and fine linen and lived in luxury every day. At his gate was laid a beggar named Lazarus, covered with sores and longing to eat what fell from the rich man's table. Okay, and the time came when the beggar died, and angels carried him to Abraham's side. The rich man also died and was buried in Hades, some translations in hell. He lifted up his eyes. That would be a kind of a King James version. In Hades, where he was in torment, he looked up and saw Abraham far away with Lazarus by his side. Now, I'm just going to stop there because that's enough of this story. This is a story that Jesus tells. This is the God of Jesus, or the justice of Jesus, as told in a parable. Never mind even how we got here, because I could talk about this a lot. I'm going to save some for this conversation. In hell, he lifted up his eyes where he was in torment. This is any God who has such a place to put people for any amount of time for any reason cannot be a good God. Why am I wrong here?
Well, when you skip down to, I can't. I agree with you on that in some ways. It's kind of cold to throw somebody into a fiery chamber for the rest of eternity to burn, because of the actions that they took upon the earth during for a temperate period for a small amount of time,
And
right?
whether it was fire and whether he was on fire or just really close to it and it was uncomfortable, I don't care what it was. It says he was in torment, and so whatever version of torment allows him to have this conversation with Abraham, that's fine. I don't care about the details. The fact is, because he did something in his life, which is to not give money to the beggar at his door, I dare say less than 1% of 1% of Christians in America would give money to beggars at their door. Never mind that. Set that aside. Push that over for another time. He is sent to a place where he's placed in torment. All right. That's bad. It would be one thing if he simply died. annihilation. Death is his punishment. But no, he died and he was woke up by God and put in a place of torment. You don't need any other part of this story to understand that this is a story that Jesus is telling to people to talk about, at least in part, what awaits you if you're like this rich man.
Yeah, I've heard this told in a couple of different ways. And the main thing about this story, it's not, obviously the scary part at the top is very real. It's always a application that for yourself. But record, but the real interesting part is that, you know, he basically said, please tell my brothers that this will happen to them. And he said, you have Moses and the prophets. If they aren't listening to them, then it won't matter if someone rises from the dead. They will not listen.
So that's verse 29, in case anyone is following along. Abraham replied, they have Moses and the prophets. Let them listen to them. No, Father Abraham, he said, if someone from the dead goes to them, they will repent. He said to him, if they do not listen to Moses and the prophets, they will not be convinced even if someone rises from the dead. Now,
Right.
I've heard this described as a kind of a foreshadowing of Jesus rising from the dead. He was crucified and he rises from the dead to save our sins. And he's saying those Jewish people, if they didn't listen to Moses, they're not going to listen to me, because I will, in fact, rise from the dead, and they still won't listen.
Right.
So that's kind of that's one of the interpretations of what may have been meant by the story. Go ahead. I interrupted. I just wanted to add some context there.
No, that was very good. And okay, and so in one of my liberal churches that I attended, they took this story in regards to, our reputation on this earth.
Mm-hmm.
So if we help others and do good things, then our reputation, or our the way people will see us while we're alive, and even after that, once we've died, will be remembered as we were good people and we did good things. But if we don't do good things, we don't help others and do those things, then our reputation will burn and we will be forgotten. So I thought that was a really interesting perspective on it. I've never heard anybody preach it that way before, and I really took that. You have? Okay.
Yes, I have a Jewish rabbi. Yes, so that is kind of a Jewish interpretation of this type of thing. So and I was very surprised when I heard it, because I hadn't heard anything like that before. But if we look at the thing here that.
Are you going to bring up rich young ruler?
Yeah, he's coming. He's coming. We're gonna finish with the rich young ruler, but we got to get a little bit more juice out of Lazarus here. So they have Moses and the prophets. Who does he mean by they? Now, I know that the subject is this man's brothers. I have 5 brothers, but I think allegorically here, we're talking about the Jews as a whole. They have Moses and the prophets. This is the Jewish story. But even if you restrict it to this man's brothers and take the story,
everybody in these stories are all Jews, right?
Right. So they have Moses and the prophets. let them listen to them. So Jesus is suggesting that Moses, literal person, I think most of history disagrees with him, and the prophets. That's fine. Religions always have, some form of prophets. So good. But basically, he's endorsing the Old Testament. Now,
Right.
Jesus is not saying they have the good parts about God. He's saying they have the law, the Pentateuch. Uh, they have the Torah, and they also have the prophetic scriptures, right? Um, that suggests to me that everything in the Torah that would have been accessible to Jesus at that time, which is essentially everything in the Torah that's accessible to us today, that everything in the Torah is validated by this.
Well,
They
I
have
wonder if it truly is, though, because
they
later on,
have the
whenever Jesus,
Torah.
oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, no,
Hmm.
I was just emphasizing that. They have the
Right.
Torah. That's what is meant by Moses. They have the Torah and the books of prophecy. Jesus does not uh, part that out. They have the Torah, and the Torah that he's talking about is the Torah that we're talking about. And so it does feel a lot like a validation, even of all of the parts that we would say are no good, because Jesus would have been looking at the same stuff.
But whenever Jesus interpreted the Torah, he said that, you know, basically the whole law is wound up in two things: love God and love your neighbor as yourself. And that is the whole of the five books. So everything in the Torah that's not associated with those two things is not of the Torah,
I think
according to Jesus.
I think that's one way to look at it, but I think it's fairly selective. I think that the other way to look at it would be to say everything in the Torah represents loving God and loving one another. Not just
Hmm.
not parting it out by saying only follow the things that are love God and love one another, but to say all of this is an example of loving God and loving one another. In other words,
Hmm.
Jesus embraced the Torah and used it as a way of saying this is what loving God looks like and this is what loving others looks like. He didn't
Right.
say forget about the Torah, just remember love God and one another. No, he's incorporating the Torah into love God and love one another. He is validating the Torah and wrapping it in the wrapper of love. And I strongly question anyone's idea of love who knows the Torah and says that's it.
Hmm.
That's troubling to me. I can't get past that in my studies of Jesus. Jesus does not try to distance himself from the awful parts of the Torah. In another place, in the rich young ruler, yeah, we're getting there. We're getting there. I'm gonna just save that insight because we're almost there. But so once again, they have Moses and the prophets. How long ago? Even in their time, even in the literary time here, Jesus is talking to these people. How long ago was it since Moses walked the earth? it's been it's been
Well, according
thousands
to,
of years if you
well,
accept
the,
uh,
yeah, if you accept the Moses authorship of the book, it
right.
was at least 2,000 years, right? But if it was, if it was the archaeological or whatever dating, it would be around 1,200.
Right. Okay. So let's just take the. In fact, I would say probably 700, but look, it doesn't matter. let's take
Yeah.
the most generous that we've got there. Say 1,200. Uh, and the prophets. How long has it been since the last prophet died? at this time?
400 years.
There you go. This is a pop quiz. You got it, brother. There are a lot of Christians out there saying, how could anyone know that? Because they haven't read that. No, it's 400 years, folks. So that is in fact the answer. Very good, sir. I would not have thought less of you had you not gotten that, but I think more of you now that you did. So very good. Let's take the smaller of those two numbers, 400 years. What do you remember of your religion, of your culture's religion 400 years ago? What do you remember? What
400 years
mind?
ago?
Yes. What
I
comes
guess
to
the
mind?
Reformation.
I mean, okay. So here's the thing. We don't know anybody from that time. And we've got books. We had writing at that time. We
have
have to
John Calvin.
we have to piece it together. These are people who didn't have any of that. And whatever writings they had, these were, the least of the educated in that region, most likely. So 400 years ago, you had the prophets. They're just stories. These people have never seen a prophet. These people have never seen anything like that. They have never
And they killed them all, according to Jesus.
Right. So what version of the prophet's stories would they have even known? You're talking 400 years ago, and this rich man who recognizes his issue, and he's doing a noble thing. He's not asking for relief for himself at this time. He's saying, just save my brothers. And the callous response is, let them read their history from 400 years ago. That's not going to convince anybody of anything. But that's God in this story responding that way. He's like, I'm not going to help him. Let him go to the library. First, learn to read. So good luck there. Yes. And then
learn from the rabbinic Jews that are teaching you that I'm about to condemn 3 chapters later.
Right. Where are they going to learn about Moses and the prophets? They're going to learn about it from the people that Jesus thought were evil. These rabbinic Jews. So how is that helpful to anybody? Please save my brothers. Please let them know so that they can avoid this fate. And God, the God of Jesus, says, let them eat cake. That's not a loving response. But we're not done with the unloving response here, because I would suggest that this is one of the most anti-Semitic passages in a book full of anti-Semitic passages. So he says, if they do not listen to Moses and the prophets, they will not be convinced even if someone rises from the dead. Imagine what that is really saying. Try to feel the impact as he says, those people are so hard-hearted. They are so stubborn. They are so stupid.
Stiff-necked. You're going to go with that one, the one that Moses used.
a grave full of dead men's bones. They're an open sepulcher. They are so evil that they wouldn't be convinced even if someone rises from the dead. How dare you say that about anybody? What he's basically saying is there's nothing that could convince them, no miracle that could convince them. And this is how Christians think about atheists today. Nothing could possibly convince you. We're telling them, sure, there are things that could convince us. We haven't seen any of them. Just show us a small miracle. That's fine. No, there's your heart's so hard, nothing would convince you. You deserve to go to hell. This is what is literally being said of the Jews out of the mouth of Jesus right here and now, who is himself a Jew. This is not just tone deafness. This is an evil, vile, anti-Semitic thing to say. And I hate him for it.
Yeah. I think that, whenever it comes down to it, I always hate that, or not hate. I hate to use the word hate because it's so vile. But
Yeah, I don't actually
I've been
mind
in
it.
so many I've been in so many church services where, um, where people talk, where my pastor at the time would say, that atheists are, they know nothing, right? And that's what the whole idea of agnostics is, or atheists, or whatever. They claim to know nothing. And I disagree with that on the whole, because some of the most knowledgeable Bible people I've met in my life were people who were atheists. They usually they are the ones who brought me to the understanding of this book more than the people who were behind the pulpit. And I sometimes wonder if they knew more than the pastors who were behind the pulpit about the book. And I give them a lot of credit. I give anybody a lot of credit who knows more than the book than I do. And there's quite a few atheists who do.
Yeah.
That's, and I don't believe that somebody who doesn't believe in this book that I'm holding knows more about it, that they're any worse of a person than I do. The only question I have is, are they right?
Yeah,
And that's
I get
if
upset
they are
with the
right, then maybe the 7 years of time that I've dedicated 7 to 10 hours a day of studying it has been a moot point, and I should have studied Chaucer
well, I mean
or whatever.
that would have
You
been
know what I'm saying?
fine too. That would have been okay. Look, I have no problem with people studying the literature of the Bible. It's probably the most
Yeah.
consequential literature that has ever been written. I have no problem with
Well,
saying that.
my
So it
whole thing is whenever I die, I I want people to I want scripture read at my funeral.
yeah, but
I want
you're gonna have to be
Romans eight
specific.
twenty eight through 8:39
Right. That's a
read.
beautiful passage, but
Yes.
you're going to have to be specific. You can't just say I want scripture
You
read at my
can't.
funeral because there's a lot
I
of
know I don't want
scriptures.
I don't want Deuteronomy 28, where they talk about the whatever that won't be healed and
Well, yeah, or anything in Deuteronomy.
boils and
Frankly, you don't want to leave out Leviticus. Let's just X
leave
those out.
the fine twine linen alone.
So let me just clear something up right now because I know that at least three comments have already been written over my rant there. When I say and I hate him for it, I don't mean most people know that I am a reluctant mythicist, so I don't believe that there was a Jesus to hate. But the literary character here in this story, who's telling this story, that depiction I hate because
Well, the
that
question,
depiction here is saying something really horrible about people and is being very casual and nonchalant uh, about people and saying, "Yeah, I'm not going to send any help for them because there's no help for them. They're too stubborn. They're not going to listen to anyone. Let them burn."
well, the question is, we know that the story is talking about Jews because every story except for the few about some Roman soldiers is about the Jewish people. So you got to take this as a collective of all people because of that. So in a sense, you know, if somebody is, you know, addicted to their wealth and not willing to help, that person, is a cancer on society and they're not helping,
Not necessarily.
you know?
They could just be wealthy and a hermit, and maybe they enjoy life. Maybe they have a nice house, but they don't bother anybody. They don't help
Yeah.
anyone. They don't bother anybody. They're not a
Yeah. But
cancer on society simply because they don't donate their money to good causes. I think they would be better off if they did. I think that the world would be better off if they did. But
right.
to say that they're a cancer on society, I think would have to suggest that they're doing something actively harmful against society, and simply having a resource is not being actively harmful.
Oh, we're not talking about a virus here. We're talking about cancer. Cancer is something that, basically takes the resources from the good and uses it for itself to grow at the detriment of the good of the whole.
Sure, I would say if it was a zero sum game, I don't buy into the economics that suggests it's a zero-sum game. So if there's a pot of money, let's say a 100 coin, um, and that's all there is, and that's all there ever can be. And through luck or whatever, through whatever inheritance, whatever it is, someone ends up with 30 of the 100 coin that all of society has. Then you could say that there is some societal responsibility there. And I would have to think about that to even know how far I would go there. But that would be an example of a zero-sum game. Just because someone has done well, they've
Right.
they've bought some land, they've grown some grain, they made some good deals, they have a lot of money, they have a lot of grain because they're really good farmers and they're really good investors. They haven't actually done anything wrong yet. Right? And so just simply not giving their money away is not a wrong thing. They haven't done anything right either. They haven't done anything wrong. And so at best, they are amoral here.
I think that the main thing that we got here, though, related to this conversation, is that 99% of all the wealth that people have, like, of a person, even like someone like myself, I didn't make this phone that I'm talking on. I didn't create the computer languages that I'm writing in. I didn't make this computer that I work on and things like that. So the reality is the 1% that I have that's actually mine is the creativity of the work that I put in place. And because of that, I owe it back to people that, to society, because of what has been given to me over all these generations of time.
But
And the same thing with this ruler here.
You pay it back to society, though, because they're taxes. And that would have been the same with this ruler as well.
Right.
That is society's way of saying you live in this society and this is a communal place. And so you have to give some percentage of what you have back to society. That is exactly what taxes are.
Well, taxes are for, ultimately to build bridges and put in roads and put in parks and things like that for your
which is a way of giving back in society.
Right.
Because as all of society goes, all of society uses those roads.
But if you don't give it back, you go to prison.
Right, because now you've actively done a bad thing because you have broken the societal law of paying your fair share of the societal dues. But that's not this man's story. As near as we can tell, this rich man didn't get rich by dodging the tax collector. That wasn't the problem. So again, there's really nothing in this story. I want to talk about this story. I'm just going to cut myself off here because I have actually spent quite a bit of time writing about this. I could go on for another hour on the rich man. And I will, but not today. I will again. So look, I'm gonna just cut myself off there. You are someone that makes me want to talk about this stuff. I really want to talk to you more about this. But let's move very quickly. I want to read two more things real quick because we are at the end of what decent people can endure. Even the people who enjoy this podcast and know that this routinely goes for 2.5, 3 hours, even they are saying, "Come on, man, come on, wrap it up." You got a pause button, folks. Okay, you can go to your bathroom. It's all right. As someone who does one take on these things, I'm the one who has to wear the podcast diapers. In Same Luke, chapter 18, verse 18. Again, we're getting some insights into Jesus as a teacher. A certain ruler ask him, talking about Jesus, "Good teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" Jesus said to him, "Why do you call me good? No one is good but God alone." Again, I'm just tearing myself out of the story for a moment to touch back on something mentioned earlier. Jesus is almost going out of his way in this passage to say, "Why are you calling me God? I'm not God. Only God is good. And you're calling me good? I mean, I'm not God." This is why is Jesus doing this if he's God? He could have just said nothing. If he didn't want to reveal that he was God, he could have just let that pass.
Yes.
Instead, he speaks up and says, "I ain't God. What are you calling me God for?" So just wanted to throw that in there.
Or if you think I'm God, you should see the greater things I'm just about to do, like he did with Nathaniel.
So
underneath the tree.
so here goes. He says, "You know the commandments: do not commit adultery, do not kill, do not steal, do not bear false witness, honor your father and mother." Okay. Now he's calling these things out specifically, but literarily, I think I can say with confidence, what he's saying is keep the law. You know the law. You know, the law in its entirety. He's not saying just these things. You know, these aren't even all of the 10 Commandments. So he's not saying just these things. He's saying keep the law. Okay, this is just kind of a shorthand for that. And the man replies, "I have kept all these since I was a child." Now, I want to be clear. There's nothing in this story that suggests that this man was being arrogant or that he was being inaccurate. Neither one of these things are implicated here. And Jesus doesn't accuse him of either one of these things. Jesus said, "Keep the law." And the man says, I have. I am." And the man is probably thinking, "Great. I've done it. I guess I'm in, right?" On hearing this, though, Jesus invents some other bullshit. Oh, I'm sorry. That was my translation. Let me go back to the Catholic Bible. On hearing this, Jesus said to him, "You need to do one more thing, like Steve Jobs. One more thing." What is it, Steve? Is it a new iPod? Is it an internet communicator? A phone? Is it 3 things? Are you getting it? No, Steve. Here's the one more thing. Nerds understand. Non-nerds just think I've got Tourette's at this point. Look, trust me, this makes sense. In my world, it makes sense. So back to the passage. One more thing. Sell everything you own. Stop. Let me stop me right there. Let me stop you right there, Jesus. What do you immediately think about a religious guru in modern times, Kevin? Seriously, serious question. Who would come to you and say the words, "Sell everything you own"?
That's where you get into the David Koresh, the Applegate, and whatnot. That's the problem. People use this all the time in that regard.
Right. We are done, though, as a people who are, fairly modern, fairly wise in the ways of the world and of grifters. We're out at that point. Sell everything you own, Jesus says. And what the rich man should have said is, "I'm out." We shouldn't even have the rest of this sentence here. There is no circumstance where this is good advice. But he doesn't stop there. He trades in his small shovel for a bigger one. Sell everything you own and distribute the money to the poor. Now, what money? The money that he got from selling. Selling what? Everything that could be sold. All right? Within reason that could be sold, take all of that money and distribute the money to the poor. I want to stop right there for a moment, just as a matter of financial advice. In fact, even just as a matter of charitable advice, I would never advise someone to do that. First of all, the moment you sell everything you own and give all of your money away, you are the poor. And now you are in need of someone to distribute some money to you. So this makes absolutely no sense. Give to the poor. Well, certainly not one poor individual, because if you gave one poor individual everything that you have, you take all that money and give it to one person, guess what? They're the rich. And now they need to sell everything and give it to the poor. This is impossible on either end. It doesn't make any sense. But Jesus trades the bigger shovel he has for an even bigger one and continues to dig and says, and you will have treasure in heaven. I don't know where this heaven is. But why in heaven would it be okay to have lots of treasure when it is not okay to have it here? That does not make sense, and that requires more context. There is nothing good about this exchange, and it does not make Jesus look good and loving. You could say he had a charitable impulse because he wanted people to become poor so that they could distribute some money to other poor people that wouldn't actually make them rich and therefore wouldn't change their circumstances. He's got this charitable impulse, but it's bad advice financially. It's bad advice charitably. It's bad all around, and it's bad ultimately in the end, because he's saying, trade your treasure here and I will give you a treasure later someplace else. Tell me where this is good. How is this good?
It's a real problem. And I think that, I can't tell you how many times I've heard this sermon in a context of giving money to the church, as well as going in front of the, and usually they have an altar call and trying to get everybody to come into the church and become Christians. It is one of the, it's hard. It's a hard teaching. And this goes right along with drink my blood and eat my flesh version of, these sorts of things.
I don't know. I have to stop you right there. We're not going to talk about that on this show.
No. But
on a future show,
I'm just throwing it out there.
On a future show, we're going to eat Jesus. I promise.
And they don't. And for most people, when they read this, whenever you hear this in a church, it is a very serious. It is a very serious thing, and even as a Christian, it's very uncomfortable.
Right, but what Christians do, and you know this because you have heard it and you have probably done it. I know that I have done it. What we do is we take this really terrible advice and then we run it through the sifter, and then out the other end we give some palatable advice that Jesus did not give here. So we take the sell all of your possessions and say, just sell off some of the surplus that you're not using. And instead of giving all of the money to the poor, give some portion of it to charity. That's great. And the last person that I talked to about this said, brought up, well, you got the Salvation Army and these various Christian institutions that, are charities. They set up charities to help the poor. As if that's some kind of answer to this passage. Look, that's great. Set up charities, help the poor, but that's no part of what Jesus said here. and then you've got the people who simply legitimately don't understand their Bibles, and they say, well, that was the rich young ruler. That was him. I'm not him. Jesus didn't say that to me. Jesus also said this generically in Luke 13, same book, to a place where there's a crowd. So I'm looking at this one, but I could have taken it from elsewhere as well. Christians, read your goddamn Bible. So that said, it's just what we do. Once again, we look at this, deer in the headlights. We hear cult leader, but Jesus can't be a cult leader. And so we rephrase it. We recontextualize it until it becomes good advice for the modern age. We restate it so that we can find it palatable. But what you have to do is be perfectly honest with yourself and recognize that all those good things that we make out of this passage, none of that is what Jesus had in mind. Jesus actually meant what it sounds like he said.
It's exactly right. Yeah, he meant it just like that. And that's but the question is, going back to one of our previous conversations we had way, way earlier, was this written by man, or was this an inspiration by the Holy Spirit? Right? Because if you take if you take the three synoptics and you take the Gospel of John, they're very different.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, obviously, there's some things that are within, but I don't know how to parse it. It's very difficult for me, and I wish that. But I can tell you that passage right there is one of the most. It's been more abused than just about everything else in the Bible.
So that's
at least honest. In our current time.
That is honest. I applaud you for it. And just hang on to that feeling of uncomfortability. This is serious advice. You're in a journey. You're in a faith journey. Right now, you're on one side of it. You might stay there for the rest of your life, or you might move closer toward the side that I'm on right now. But along that path are several moments of uncomfortability.
Yeah, it works. I got
it. And so what you have to do with those moments is sit with them honestly. You can't hide them under the rug. You can't recontextualize them so that they're not uncomfortable anymore. You have to be honest with the text that you hold dear. And once again, you don't have to come up with any answers that satisfy me or the audience or any of your advisors, but you do have to come up with answers that satisfy you. And if you don't come up with answers that satisfy you, you have to be honest about that too, right? It's hard and it takes some time. But this is Jesus. I think, at least this is the guy that people say was Jesus. These are the people who wrote about him, and they were his friends. They were people who were trying to make him look good. This is something they thought made Jesus look good. This was their version of Jesus.
Yeah. I don't know though. I wonder sometimes, if maybe this was added in post 340 or whatever after Constantine.
I don't think
you know what I mean? I don't know. I'm not a manuscript person.
Yeah,
this would be a really interesting question to ask for like Bart Ehrman, if he's ever seen this in part of his ancient manuscripts, or this is something that was introduced, that the first time they seen it was in the 11th century.
No, Bart would definitely say that this is a first century text. Yeah. I've read just about everything that Bart's written.
I know. I've read a lot of it too.
This is, Luke is, maybe late first century to be sure. Could be very early second century, but it's in there. Bart would not deny this as a legitimate text, including this last one. I'm going to close with this. Okay.
Well, I think that the big thing is that the earliest text that we have from Luke is from the 3rd century. So the text had been changed a lot, possibly, but before Luke was ever actually completely canonized as a complete book.
Interesting.
And so I know, like, we have very, very small fragments of the book of John and the book of Matthew and the book of Luke, but very, very few full copies. So, And I think the very first full copy that we have is somewhere around the 11th century.
Okay, I don't think we've got full copies of any of it. We're
Yeah,
piecing
me neither. I
we're
don't know it
piecing
either.
fragments together, but
Right,
of the experts, they know that, right? And so they
right.
still say that that this came together, um, that it would have been originated in either late first or early second century. So if you are saying that you think that Luke was third century at the
No, no,
earliest,
no. I'm saying that there's part of it definitely that was written early, but they definitely, and I believe that some of the stories were either changed or and things were added to
oh,
that that we don't
I
know.
know that things were changed and added to in the Gospels, but once
Right.
again, if you're following textual criticism, there's some places that we know were additions, even if we don't know exactly when they were. Like, for instance, the ending of the book of Mark. The book of Mark
Yes,
ends
that's a
at
very good one.
verse 9, I want to say,
Right.
and everything else after that is an addition. There's a story in the book of John, the woman at the
At the
well.
well.
Yeah,
Yes.
we know that that's an addition. There are probably others that we don't know that were, that snuck in and that made it past our best efforts at textual criticism. When were
Yeah.
those things added in? We don't know. So I
Yeah.
acknowledge that there are some things like that, but this is not a disputed text, um, uh, as far as I'm aware. And so if you are
I am
aware of
certainly
that,
not.
okay,
I'm
well,
not. I'm not a scholar in that
if
regard.
you come across an article and you send it to me, I'll include it in the show
Yeah.
notes so that people can read it, because I do have an interest in
Yeah.
textual criticism, and so I do care, for if anyone wants to know. So
Yeah.
I want to close this out with a passage that we didn't talk about in advance, but I thought it would round out some of the teaching of Jesus that I want to hold in front of you and leave you maybe a little uncomfortable. So I know a good host would want to leave his guests comfortable. I never claimed to be a good host.
Oh, you've been fantastic. I
So
can't tell you how much I appreciate this opportunity to talk to you.
sure. Let's look at Matthew. So we're leaving Luke. As anyone can tell, I kind of like Luke. Maybe not for the reasons that Christians would want me to, but I do. My favorite of the Gospels, by the way, is Mark. But be Mark, Luke, John, and Matthew in that order, for me. Um, we can talk about that sometime, maybe the next time we talk, because we will get more into this. I really can't wait to pick your brain about some of these parables. I'm giddy with excitement to talk about that with someone who wants to nerd out with me on that. Um, Verse 21, chapter 7, Matthew.
Oh my goodness. You knew you would hit that one. How did I know? That's
Yeah,
not a parable.
it's not, and yet it might be.
It is kind of, yeah, I know what
it's
that one
it's
is. Yeah,
very
Lord.
yeah, it's
Lord,
very
Lord.
parable-ish. So
Oh, I hate
um
that one too. That's another one people beat you up over.
yeah, so let's just open it up a little. I know we won't cover it all, but it's a short passage. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my heavenly Father. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name? Did we not drive out demons in your name? Did we not perform many miracles in your name? Then I will tell them plainly. And for the record, it would be one of the few things Jesus ever said plainly, but back to the reading. I will tell you plainly, I never knew you.
Yeah.
Depart from me, you evil doers.
R.C. Sproul, that's just one of his favorites.
Yeah,
And so, did you know that? by the
Uh,
chance?
I
R.C. Sproul, he
yeah,
loves this one.
yeah. I
And
and I love R.C. Sproul's. so so
yeah,
this one, there are lots of places you can take it, but I would just take it here because once again, this is something supposedly and not in a disputed text said by Jesus as remembered by Matthew.
right.
Uh, and the chilling thing about this story, and this one kept me up at night when I was a child Christian. I was baptized at 7. I knew the Bible pretty well even then. This one kept me up at night through most of my time as a Christian. The idea that this person is at the gates of heaven, whatever that means. They are there.
Right.
They are with the saints marching in, and Jesus says, "Let me stop you right there."
In the throne room of God. He's
Right
already
there.
died. He's in the throne room. He thinks he's about to walk
He
through the pearly
thinks he's
gates.
getting his party. You did you ever watch Goodfellas?
Oh yeah, several times.
The scene where
Joe Pesci
yeah,
walks into
Pesci
the
goes
room.
in, he thinks he's about to become a made man. And he looks around, and there's this cellophane all over the floor. This is not a good sign.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
This
No,
is
he's walking into a basement, and then that's when he gets shot.
ah,
Right? Yeah.
what a scene. what a maybe one of the greatest scenes in movie history. I'm not sure.
Oh,
just that moment, and Joe Pesci plays the hell out of that character.
yes.
I find that a chilling moment, just like I found this a chilling passage. This is the person who knows for certain, they had the certainty of the Holy Spirit, whatever that means, that they're on the Lord's side, and they had external evidence to prove it. It wasn't just something that was in their heart. They were able to prophesy in the name of Jesus. Who gives a person the power to prophesy? That doesn't come from the devil. You can't get that power. You can't buy it. They drove out demons. By Jesus' own arguments, demons don't drive out demons. If you can drive out demons, you must be of God. That was Jesus' argument in Matthew 10, 25-ish, thereabouts.
Yes.
They drove out demons. So they know that if they had tried to drive out demons and they couldn't do it, they would have had reason to think, oh, maybe God's not with us. But they had the power to do it, and they did it. And they didn't stop there. Did we not perform many miracles? There were so many categories, they could only be described as many miracles. Not some cheap leg lengthening tricks. They performed many miracles in a religious context, by the way, in the name of Jesus. They were allowed to perform many miracles. If there was anyone who had the right to think that they were on their way in, it's whoever this fictional person is that Jesus is talking about. But Jesus says, nope, you missed it. And I don't care what secret sin they had in their life. I don't care what attitude problem they had in their life. I don't care what part of God's will they hadn't done. It's just utter evil and callous for them to end up this way, because at any point along the way, God could have tapped them on the shoulder and with the power of the Holy Spirit led them in a more productive direction. Instead, he kept giving them power to do all of these miraculous things and thinking that they were on the right path. And then the lights come on and they're on cellophane.
Mm-hmm.
And the machine guns begin.
Yeah.
They have this let me know beyond any shadow of doubt. I don't care what any other pastor said, but there is no way to know whether you're on the right path or not, whether you've got the right God or not. You think you've got this idea of the perfect God, but the God you think you have is the God that on the last day will say, nope, Bye.
Well, okay. So one of these days we need to do this one. So I just got finished with a deep study into the book of First John.
Okay.
Okay. And
It's
the
a very
purpose of the
short
book,
book.
it's a very short book that took me a year to go through it.
Wow. All right.
And
Yeah, we're
so,
definitely going to have to do that show.
and so basically the purpose of First John is so that way you have salvation.
Right.
It's, I think, know or gnosis or whatever it is that's in Latin, or I'm sorry, not in Latin, but in Greek, is spoke of 53 times in the book of First John. And there are 9 tests of salvation within it. And basically, you walk through the book of First John, and that's how you know you're saved. One of them is that you believe in Jesus Christ, that he was a person, he lived on the earth. Second one is that you love your brothers and sisters in Christ. 3, that your prayers are answered. 4 is that you don't love the world. And I can't remember the other ones off the top of my head, but those are basically the number. Those are 4 of them.
Yes.
And so basically, you go through the book of First John, and that's how you know.
Okay,
so the question is, 721 is this person here didn't the test in First John obviously did not apply.
Right. They didn't have First John.
They didn't have First John.
It was not a part of Moses or the prophets. I'm sorry.
But we do. But anyway, that was and I tell you, there's hardly a scarier book than the book of First John.
Right. No, I get it. I want to geek out about that so much. But the point is, it doesn't matter. This is why I said what I said toward the end. I don't care what sin they were harboring, what they were doing. There was clearly enough fervent and sincere desire to serve God in them that they were doing all of these things for God all of their lives. And we're just like that today. Some people, they end up getting caught up in a cult. Well, they didn't know it was a cult. They had no idea. They had no way of knowing. They get sucked in and they get some bad doctrine. Or they run into, a Mormon instead of a Lutheran. Okay, that's your tough luck. You should have listened to the Lutheran and not the Mormon. Well, the Lutheran was further down the road. The Mormon got to me first. I didn't know. It sounded right. It doesn't matter what thing they were missing or wrong about. What matters is that God sees that person, meets them where they are, and through whatever mysteries he uses, brings them to a more correct knowledge of who he is and what they should be doing. And in this passage, Jesus makes it clear that God doesn't give a damn. He will watch you fall on your face and even help you with magic. He will give you fucking magic and then laugh your ass right into the fiery furnace. No explanation. Bye. I don't care what John says about how you can know. Jesus makes it clear you can't know. You don't know. This kept me up. I can't tell you how badly this one passage fucked me over.
I'm sorry
did a number on me. And
I can't tell you how many times a pastor in this world has read that. I know what it is right when you said it.
Yeah.
Matthew 7:21. Lord. And that's, you need to get your life right with God right now and come to repent.
Get your life right with God right now.
And straighten it up.
Except you won't know whether you got it right with God or not. You won't know.
That's what they should have followed with the First John. 1 John 5:7. And they that way it would give some people some stinking comfort. Because the answer to Lord is First John. you know?
So look, Kevin, I will tell you now. I will make a prediction. This is not a prophecy. I'm terrible at these predictions too. But my prediction is, out of all that we have talked about today, for those who have chosen to not like what you have had to say, this has been a target-rich environment. But the thing you will get the most comments on will be this. I think that they should have went to First John. this, this is this is the thing that's going to
That's
get
the answer. They
highlighted.
should, every pastor should go through First John and reference it back to 7:21 and show the difference. This is how you know it's First John. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. You, you you let me give you one piece of advice. Don't read the comments.
I'm
or,
not worried about the comment.
or do
But
read
I
the
just
comments,
want you to
but
know
just
that
laugh.
everything was honest and truthful, and I
Yes.
tried to present it the best I could. And I'm sorry if I offended anyone,
No, look,
because it was never in my intention to do so.
you seem to me like the most inoffensive person on earth, which guarantees you're going to get it from both sides.
That's okay. I can live with that. I'm a
It's
down the middle kind of guy.
it's gonna happen. So I that said, what a pleasure it's been. What a freaking joy this has been to a hard series of days for me. I've got some tough things to do the rest of the week. I mentioned that we do Skeptics and Seekers Sunday Sermon Shorts pretty much every day. It's a daily. There are going to be some missed days this week. I did one this morning, but the chances of that happening more than once or twice more this week probably very slim. I've got some traveling to do, and that I don't look forward to. By the way, it's going to take some time, and I'll get back sometime over the weekend, and I will put this show up. It'll air, so by the time people hear this, they will already be wondering what happened to the dailies. Now I'm just coming to an explanation, but I should pick it up. And in the meantime, look, I will do my best, Kevin, to lure you back onto the show for at least a series of 5 shows. They don't have to all do.
First John, you want to go through the 7? Do you want to go through
Uh,
the 7 test, or do you
they
want to go
don't.
through all 9?
Well, no, we're gonna do the hell out of First John. I guarantee you that. But the series I want to do with you, someone who is a careful reader and a sensitive uh, reader, I want to go through the parables with you, and I want to give you some time to just teach on what you think the parables are saying, because honestly it doesn't matter what your theology is. The parables are literature that is, I mean, it's still vital literature today for many people. And so I would love to get a little bit of your take, a lot of bit of your take on that. I think that I can learn a lot from that, and also many opportunities for good conversations in the parables. And that's at least 5 shows. There I read somewhere, haven't counted, that there were about 43 parables, and I bet that that doesn't include the parables in the Bible that aren't marked parables, but
Right.
that are in fact parables. And so there may be somewhere closer to 50 parables, and I just want to take them in batches and work through them over the rest of the year and over into next year. And we can do a show once a month, or whenever we can find time. But I need you back on the show to consider to continue this conversation. It's been a blast, and you people like you, I bring out my better angels. Believe it or not, these are my better angels. You should see me when I'm mad. The 2 people that I've had on the show that remind me most of you, and you can go back and find these in the archives, but it would it was Thomas Ord and Mark Karras. They have some God views that I think are very compatible with the kind of God that you're talking about. And Randall Rouser, I don't know if you know Randall. He and I have had several conversations and done shows together. I think that there is some, though it's not the same, there's a lot of similarity with your God and Randall Rouser's God.
I
These
want to
are
do
some,
one with Gary Hudson. Gary
well,
Hudson and I are like we're like brothers from another mother. I
I
tell you,
I
he and
will
I.
I will
It's
try to
so
make it
funny.
happen.
His story is just awesome.
Yeah,
He's one of the best guests I've heard in a long time, and
yeah,
I love his history. And,
yeah.
I went back and listened to him talk about the King James only, and I loved it. I loved it. He's phenomenal speaker too.
Yeah, there's if you follow my YouTube channel, there is a YouTube channel. Uh Skeptics, I think it's Skeptics and Seekers, the YouTube channel. I never updated that to 4S, but there is a person, I want to say something Vulture. I can't remember his username. There's Vulture in it. He is a King James onlyist, and I've exchanged some strong words with him. But I'm
Oh,
pretty sure
Gary
that he'll.
Hudson's not King James. He's I forgot how he put it. He's a double pot, double
Right.
whatever. I forgot.
No, no, he used to be a King
Double
James only,
apostate.
yes, right. But
Yes.
the Vulture character that I'm talking about is a King James onlyist.
Oh, that's
Um,
funny.
and yeah, no. So if you want some of that, follow the YouTube channel. It's all there. So with that, I'm not going to make any closing remarks except to say, look, just keep doing what you're doing, Kevin. My journey at one point in the journey, admittedly closer to the end than the beginning, looked a lot like your journey now, and it could have gone any number of ways. I could still be a Christian today. I'm sure that in a in a an environment, excuse me, in an environment where all possible universes happen. Uh, in some universe, I remained a Christian, defined very much the way you define it now, because I've been there. I've sojourned in that place for a little while, and believe it or not, it is not my goal to make you an atheist. I have no desire to do that. Don't care. You believe whatever you want to. Um, I honestly don't care. I think it makes for good conversation. I think it's useful to explore what you believe about the most important things that are in your life. But mostly, my advice to you is just to be true to you, to be true to your mind and not just your heart. Because if your heart is pushing you in one direction, but your mind is saying there be dragons there, do not ignore your mind because your heart feels satisfied for a time. I can tell you that feeling that you feel that is satisfied by this thing can be just as satisfied without it. It can be satisfied by other things. There are lots of ways to appeal to the heart. So let your mind help guide you. And if you find that this place really just leaves you in that kind of eternal dissonance of my heart says yes, but my head says you fool, maybe keep looking until your heart and your head find some peace together.
Well, thank you for those kind words. I know we'll definitely have to do this again, and I don't know, when our time, when we both have bandwidth at the same time again. But it's been really nice. Thank you so much, David, for having me on your show, and I hope that you know I hope it was as good for you as, or I hope it was as fun for you as it was for me.
Oh, it was good for me.
Yeah.
It was very good.
Yeah. It's great.
Maybe, maybe if you agree to it, um, I can
Mm.
the next time we talk. I still want to do the parables, but maybe the next time we talk, I can invite one of my friends along for the ride. Sarah has not done a show with me for a while. Sarah, you and Kevin need to talk.
I would
I
love
just
that. I'm
you
open for anything.
she is
So,
look, she's with you. Okay, she is she is on your side. Uh, you have a friend in her. I feel certain of it. You and Sarah need to talk. That would be very worthwhile. I would love to get you in the same virtual room with Matt Taylor. Matt and Andrew are people who have very different stories, but that would be a that would be a great conversation because they would go in directions that I wouldn't. And of the three of us, me, Andrew, and Matt is the nice one, but
oh, sure.
and he's also really
He
smart.
must be really nice because I felt like you were super nice.
Oh no,
So,
I'm a dick.
no, you're kind. So, all
so
right.
there are just a few people that I think that you would really pair well with, and so I know that some people would love to hear that as well. So with all of that said, though, I am going to call it a day for this time. Next time, I have no idea what show it's going to be or when it's going to be. It might skip a week. I think Clint is going to be next because we started a series on the gifts of the Holy Spirit, and I'm
Oh,
chomping at the
that's a good
bit to
one.
do the next one. In that we've already done one, and uh, the next one's going to be good. So, with
Yeah.
that, thank you for tuning in. I'm out.
All right. Thanks.